I can try to read this, but my Greek pronunciation is atrocious, so maybe somebody can help me. The first one, could you get your father to answer here, for the record, one thing he did not explain on the show. How do you presume a gathering, quote, gathering from ekastos humon par heauto? It looks to me like the Greek here does double emphasis to indicate a private personal circumstance rather than indicating a gathering. Perhaps he is thinking that they would then collect from each individual to be ready, but I think that is adding to the context. What the context is clearly saying is to be arrangements ahead of time, but couldn't that be understood to mean not waiting to put aside until later? Would the present subjunctive of is it hey or is heaudota? Okay, possibly indicate an ongoing process of prospering and then remembering each first day to set some aside. Is there any historical information that might inform us about paydays in that time? Were workers paid daily or weekly? The clear statement we are given is each of you by yourself, not each of you together, which would make more sense if they were meeting.
Okay, good. Let me make a clarification. First of all, the number of weeks ago when we were talking about this on the radio program, I didn't mean to imply that everyone necessarily got together in one single place at the same time on the first day of the week in order to collect monies. Okay, if I gave that...
And what passage are we referring to again?
1 Corinthians 16, 1 and following. Okay, it starts out, the text says, now concerning the collection for the saints, that is, for the believers, as I directed the churches of Galatia, so do you also. And then he says, on the first day of the week, and this is the text that the person is particularly having questions about.
I believe this is Lois Morgan. Keep going.
On the first day of the week, each one of you is to put aside and save as he may prosper, so that no collections be made when I come. Now, the question that she has is, was I implying that they all, left their homes and went to a gathering place on the first day of the week? No, I'm not implying that. But I think that when we look at the whole context, he says, so on the first day of the week, each one of you is to put aside and save as he may prosper, so that no collections may be made when I come. Now, the interesting thing is that the word collections here seems to be in the plural. It is in the plural because it's the eudotai, and that means a gift. It's clearly not something that he's requiring them to do. He's, like he said earlier in chapter 8, he wants them to give of their own volition freely without any compulsion. So what I take this to mean is that on the first day of the week, people should set aside money, or should at that point in time start saying, what can we give this week? But my suggestion is that they didn't just keep it in their own homes or in their own living quarters, but that they actually went and deposited it somewhere. It could be one at a time. Somebody could do it first thing in the morning. Others could do it later in the day or at night or whatever. And the reason that I suggest that is because he says, so that no collections, plural, may be made when I come. So it isn't that everyone is bringing, when Paul finally comes, and this was for the poor the believers who were impoverished in Jerusalem during the time of the famine. He was bringing them funds in order to buy food and so forth. So what he's saying is, when I come, I don't want everyone to have to come and bring their money. I want the money to have already been collected. My suggestion is that it is a command given to each individual household. Okay, and it is a command to set it aside, but why does he say put aside and save? I think it may well mean put it aside, that is, bring it and put it in a central treasury. Now, all of us, I think all of us, I know this is certainly the true for my household, if we don't allocate money at the first of the month for the bills that we're going to have, if we wait until later on and say, oh, okay, I guess we need to pay bills, we oftentimes wouldn't have the money saved aside. So we budget, as it were. I don't think that he was asking people to keep the money in their own place, because what happens is if you start putting money in a cookie jar, 6 months later, you say, oh, we got this much in the cookie jar, we can do this with it, and it's used for something else. I think more than likely they were having a central depository, some maybe deacon, some shamashim that were collecting these funds and then using them, collecting them and so that when Paul came, he could give them. Now, the question of pay. Of course, the Torah says that one is to be paid every evening at the end of the day. So amongst the Jewish people, that may have been a common thing. We don't know. There's no indication whether that was actually happening in the first century. The other thing, which goes to her second question, but I'll just start here, and that is slavery was huge in Rome. Now, there were all kinds of classes of slaves. The majority of the slaves, however, worked either in the mines or in the fields, agrarian or mining, okay? The worst job was the mining. The second worst job were the fields because they were the most intense in terms of labor. There were oftentimes, the beating of the slaves if they didn't get a quota done and so forth and so on. So were the slaves paid? In later Rome, in imperial Rome, there were some compensations given to slaves, so much so that what we discover is that there were slaves who saved enough money to win their freedom, to buy their freedom. So there was some slaves who had money, but they were still slaves. They were the lowest echelon of the society. They were opposite of freemen or free workers. Now, the majority, as far as we can tell from the data that I've searched out at least, the majority of work done in imperial Rome was done by slaves. There were those who even suggested, there are some documents that have suggested that landowners decided they should do away with their paid laborers and just get slaves. The difficulty was, especially for agrarian parts of the society, you had to continue to support the slave, that is, give him or her room and board, even during the off-season when they weren't working in the fields. Whereas you could hire, freemen laborers, and you would only pay them for the work they did. However, the pay that you paid a freeman worker was higher, much, much higher than what you would have ever paid the slaves, and most slaves weren't paid. They were just given room and board. So when wages were paid, that's a very difficult thing. It doesn't seem like there was a standard. It seems that they were paid sometimes for the job. They were paid other times by other kinds of things besides money. They were paid for with food. They were paid with animals from the farm, those kinds of things. Sometimes they were paid with clothing. I read one thing yesterday when I was researching this, that there was one document that said a landowner gave not his paid slaves, not his free slaves, but his indentured slaves, he gave them one set of clothing, which include an outer garment and undergarments, one time every 2 years. I mean, can you imagine that? To have extra clothing was a real luxury, and sometimes they were paid for excellent service, or they were given a reward by giving extra clothing. And sometimes those that were actually not indentured slaves or household slaves, but were hired slaves or hired laborers, were paid the clothing. So we really don't have the kind of pay that we're thinking of in our day, where you would get, a check or money, something like that every week or every day, whatever. So we really don't know.